My name is Marianne Gouveia, and I'm the founder of ericshouse.org. I'm here today with my dear friend, Eve Picard. Eve is the author of the Amazon hit, The Soul Hacker, Soul Hacks for Success. Eve is a certified life coach and former corporate finance lawyer and law lecturer. Eve experienced the suicide loss of her husband, Keurig, who chose to end his life on her 40th birthday. She has held a successful career in law, practicing both in the United Kingdom and New Zealand. Eve decided to retire from law in order to discover her life purpose. So Eve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and perhaps cover why you left corporate law and what you were looking for when you did.
Yeah, I went into law primarily because I've always been really a person who understood, even as a child, that I was on this planet for a purpose. And I went into law because I wanted to be a human rights lawyer.
Okay.
And, I felt that that was my purpose, what I was passionate about, what wouldn't feel like work. But I couldn't get my law school fees paid by the kinds of law firms that do human rights law.
Sure.
So I ended up having to be sponsored by a corporate law firm. And once you've gone down that path, it's very hard to change direction. It's such a different area of law. So I did the corporate law for about 15 years.
Okay.
And, I actually say in my book, I'd be walking down the street in London towards each morning, and I'd be reciting T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland in my head,
Okay.
which is,
Sure.
Each man fixed his eyes before his feet. So many, I had not thought death had undone so many. And this is what I'm thinking every morning.
Yeah,
that's
beautiful, though. Yes.
Well, and I realized, and I looked into the eyes and faces of all the people on the street around me. And it was like they were having the same experience. So it was like, maybe this is just what life is. But I knew there had to be more. And
Sure.
I knew, with all my friends, talking to them, we all had this void inside. Like, really? This is it? And, some people filled that through children. I was told at my law firm myself by one of the partners, a few of the partners on different occasions, that maybe I should have children and then I'd stop worrying about myself and my own happiness. And I'd just be worried about how I can pay for my kids' school fees.
Sure. That's an interesting thing. Yeah. Interesting thing for them to say.
Yeah. So after 15 years, I just realized, this isn't me. Clients would say, why are you a lawyer? This isn't you.
Yeah.
You seem to have a bit more about you. And one day I just listened, and it was scary, but I just thought, no. I need to actually feel fulfilled in my life.
Okay. Now, we mentioned earlier that you lost your dear husband, Keurig, to suicide. Can you talk about how that has impacted you?
Yeah. I mean, he actually attempted it the first time 12 years before he succeeded. That was about 2 years into our time together. So for 12 years, it just meant that I lived with a lot of fear. And really my focus, and that's maybe why I was able to just stay in the law. I'd only ever intended to do it for 3 years at most. Maybe, and I met him about 3 years into doing it. So I think because I was so focused on trying to keep him alive, which, wasn't within my power to do, I now realize, I really took my eye off the ball of my own life.
Okay.
And he was my focus, and just trying to get him well and his happiness. So when he actually took his own life, It was, the thing I'd been fighting against for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for 12 years, I thought if he did take his own life, it would destroy me.
Sure.
I wasn't sure that I'd survive
Sure.
losing him. But when he did die, and the sky fell in, and I was still standing, I realized that I'm meant to be here. This isn't my time. It was his time. It's
Sure.
not my time.
Sure.
And in that moment, when I found his body, it was a very quick mental conversation. It's like, I'm choosing to live.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to talk, Eve, a little bit about your book, because I know that once, it had been on your mind for many, many years to write a book, and you finally kind of hunkered down and, put pen to paper and wrote The Soul Hacker.
That's
and
right.
It's doing quite well. In your book, you talk about fear being a big part of what holds so many of us back, not only from living our full potential, but also from allowing ourselves to heal and integrate grief into our lives. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. My book is really just the self-coaching tools I'd used throughout my life in the areas of my life where it ran very smoothly. So career. I always knew I could achieve anything I wanted to in career. And the place that fear crept in for me was in my personal relationships, which I think is probably, if it's going to crop up anywhere in people's lives, first it's going to be in interpersonal relationships, but it may also be in career. I'm just lucky I didn't have it in career. So I realized that in career, it went very, very smoothly because I didn't have fear sabotaging me.
Interesting.
Yeah, with fear, we actually think in worrying about things, in trying to make ourselves safe, we actually think we're doing something positive, when actually all we're doing is putting blocks in our way and stopping ourselves being able to access our inner genius and see opportunities and access our inner genius, so we know intuitively where we need to go. So fear, we think it's keeping us safe, we think it's protecting us, but all it actually does is make us live very small lives. Have fear. So my book is the self-coaching tools that I sort of brought across from what I'd used in career and started using in my personal life to realize where I did have fear in my mind, because we don't know we have it. We're so conditioned from children to try and keep ourselves safe. So we don't even know we're operating from fear because it's a systemic low level of fear. It's not the sort of fight and flight on the big scale. There's a hungry lion in your room. It's a low level fear that we're so used to operating under that we have no idea that it is actually fear we're feeling. I call it dis-ease. And it's actually not dis-ease, it's actually fear.
Yeah. You talk also in your book about your ego program. Can you explain that?
Sure. So, I call it an ego program because I'm sort of a little bit Spock-like and come at things very logically. So, it's the same sort of concept as ego, but I just see our mind as being like a computer, and the synapses, the coding, the computer programming. And in our childhood, because we have this fear, because we lack autonomy and we want to keep ourselves safe, and how can you really keep yourself safe physically, emotionally, if you don't have autonomy? You can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So what the mind does instead is give us the illusion by creating a computer program in our mind. And that's what I call the ego program.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we employ a number of coping mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
to make ourselves feel safe. Like, for instance, tolerating.
Sure.
If somebody's mean to us, we'll tolerate them or we'll forgive them. Where if we had autonomy and somebody has done something mean to us that was totally uncalled for, the natural thing wouldn't be to forgive them if they hadn't indicated why that will never happen again.
Mm-hmm.
The natural thing would be to distance ourselves from the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not saying the person's a bad person, you're saying I don't like that behavior. That
Sure.
behavior doesn't make me feel good. So we would usually distance ourselves, but as a child you can't. So the ego program develops this coping mechanism so we can forgive, tolerate, be safe.
Mm-hmm. In part 2 of your book, you provide your readers with some self-coaching tools.
Yes.
Could you share a few of those with us?
Sure. The first one is turn down the noise and tune in. Mm-hmm. And what our ego program does very, very effectively is stop us looking within.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the ego program's trying to protect us. It was developed in childhood when we didn't have autonomy. So the ego program didn't want us to look within and realize that actually sometimes maybe we were in unsafe situations. We didn't have autonomy. We had to do what we were told. So the ego program, its sort of raison d'etre is that we never look inside.
Sure.
Because it's terrified we'll realize that we're powerless, we're not good enough. These fears, because the ego program, it's all fear-based.
Sure.
So the first soul hack, self-coaching tool that you have to do before you can do any other soul hack is you've got to turn down the noise and tune in. And this is difficult for people to do because your ego program is going to be screaming at you, that way lies madness.
Yeah.
Look away, look away. Because the ego program doesn't realize that when you reach adulthood, most of us do have autonomy and we are able to access our consciousness and stand in our power and own our potential. So the ego program doesn't have an expiration date, unfortunately. Okay. So it still thinks it's protecting us. So we have to turn down the noise, tune in, and look within. Mm-hmm. And the ego program is going to want to stop us doing that.
Well, thank you for that, Eve. And for our viewers, as you know, we're hosting a Healing Insights, Healing Hearts workshop here in Phoenix on October 13th and 14th. And the conference will focus on healing arts, including alternative forms of healing that include meditation, yoga, diet and nutrition, and traditional therapies like counseling, EMDR, and coaching as well. And Eve is going to deliver our keynote address. And Eve, perhaps you could give us a sneak preview of what you're going to talk about.
Sure. Well, I'm going to be talking about soul hacks, and I'm going to be talking about my big thing, which is fear. And I think a lot of people get stuck in grief. And it's maybe not even that they get stuck in grief. They have so much fear, as we naturally do, about grieving, and that it's going to, like I had when my husband died, that if we actually suffer that loss and we feel that grief, because it is so painful, we have so much fear that it's actually going to destroy us.
Yeah.
So our ego program actually blocks us from actually experiencing genuine grief. And instead it comes up with these coping mechanisms. So we don't have to just sit in and experience our grief. So like anger, bargaining, denial, when really what grief should be when it's healthy is just acceptance. You've just got to feel it. You've just got to go through it. And when you do go through it, you realize that it's horrible, but it's not going to destroy you.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and I'm so much looking forward to working with you on October 13th and 14th. And I know that your keynote address is going to be fantastic.
Oh, let's hope so. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
All right. And to our viewers, we hope to see you on October 13th and 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.